Back in the 1990s, a mass bank robber unleashed a wave of terror across the greater Chicago area. This wasn't just any criminal. He was a firearms expert who had a deep understanding of police tactics. His heists were swift, calculated, and flawless, leaving authorities scrambling in his wake. Both the local police and the FBI quickly realized that their only shot at capturing him was catching him in the act. But predicting his next move? That was nearly impossible. On average, a bank robbery yielded around $3,000, a relatively small sum considering the high risks involved. Yet, some criminals are willing to gamble everything for it. In a quiet suburb just outside Chicago, a masked man embarked on a series of bank heists that became increasingly violent with each hit. My name is Jim Carlstrom, former head of the FBI's New York field office. A seasoned investigator recalls. When we started tracking this guy, we discovered he wasn't working alone, and he would do whatever it took to avoid being caught. March 5th, 199X, Chicago, Illinois. At a small bank on the southern edge of the city, employees began their day expecting nothing out of the ordinary. The morning was calm, business as usual, until it wasn't. By 10 a.m., the peace shattered. Get the money out. Hands off the alarm, the masked man barked, his voice sharp with authority. The bank employees, fully aware that compliance was their safest option, did exactly as he ordered. As quickly as he had appeared, the robber vanished, leaving panic and fear in his wake. Once the coast was clear, someone finally managed to call the police. "We've been robbed." The desperate voice on the other end of the line sent officers racing toward the scene. The first units from the Chicago Police Department arrived in minutes. Witnesses described the suspect as a tall man, roughly 5 feet 11 inches, with light skin. But beyond that, he was unrecognizable, masked, gloved, and eerily well-prepared. One of the tellers recalled a chilling detail. He had a police radio scanner. He knew exactly what they were saying. Even more disturbing, he handled his semi-automatic weapon like a trained professional. He left no fingerprints, and the surveillance footage was frustratingly unhelpful. Determined to find a lead, officers canvassed the surrounding area. A local woman, who lived near the bank, thought she might have seen something suspicious. There was a guy with a fake beard, she told investigators. He got into a 4-door car, but I didn't catch the license plate. Still, her description of the vehicle gave the police something to work with. Within a short time, they located an abandoned car just a few blocks away. Approaching cautiously, aware that the suspect could still be nearby, an officer examined the vehicle. Empty. The door was unlocked, but the ignition was covered with a crumpled paper towel. A quick records check confirmed the car had been stolen from a shopping center parking lot just 4 days earlier. No fingerprints, no DNA, no obvious clues. Just a ghost in a disguise. With the robbery fresh on their hands, local authorities quickly realized this was no ordinary case. Since bank robbery is a federal crime, the Chicago Police Department promptly handed the case over to the FBI. "We had been investigating dozens of bank robberies at the time," recalled a veteran FBI agent. "Some days, we dealt with 2 or 3 heists in a single week. Most of those crimes were committed by amateurs, reckless individuals who were easy to track down. But as the investigators pieced together the details of this latest robbery, one thing became clear. This was a calculated operation, carried out by someone who knew exactly what they were doing. The man with the fake beard struck again. 2 months after the initial heist, a bank in the quiet suburb of Libertyville became his next target. But this time, he wasn't satisfied with just the cash from the drawers. "Open the vault," he demanded, his gun never wavering. The tellers hesitated. "No tricks." "Move it," he snapped. Then came the warning that sent chills down their spines. "I'm listening to the police radio. If you press a silent alarm, I'll know." Within minutes, he walked away with thousands of dollars in cash. As usual, he disappeared into a waiting vehicle. But this time, there was a crucial difference. One of the bank employees caught a glimpse of the getaway car's license plate. With that information, the Libertyville police sprang into action, tracking the vehicle. Not long after, officers discovered it abandoned several blocks away. Just like before, the car had been stolen days prior from a shopping center. And once again, the ignition was covered, this time with a neatly folded cloth. FBI Special Agent Hank Schmidt carefully examined every detail of the crime scenes. One thing stood out: the suspect's handling of his weapon. He held his gun in a very particular way, Schmidt noted. It's a stance that's not common among criminals, but it's something police officers and FBI agents are trained to do. That realization changed everything. The team was no longer looking for just a skilled robber. They were likely hunting someone with law enforcement or military training, and that meant he was going to be very, very difficult to catch. With the possibility that their suspect had law enforcement or military training, the investigation took a new turn. The media had already picked up on the case, dubbing the unknown criminal the Bearded Bandit. Hoping to generate leads, the FBI released surveillance images to the public, despite the suspect's heavy disguises. We put his photo on the news, hoping someone would recognize him, an investigator explained. He always wore a fake beard, sometimes a mustache, sometimes a baseball cap. But unfortunately, the disguise worked too well. No one came forward. Then, in November 1990, he struck again. This time, the robbery didn't go as smoothly. A teller in a Wheeling, Illinois bank managed to press the silent alarm undetected. Within moments, police dispatchers sent out an alert. All available units, we have an armed robbery in progress. But the Bearded Bandit was listening. His police scanner picked up the message, alerting him that officers were on their way. Normally, a bank robber's first instinct would be to flee, but this man did something unexpected. He didn't run. Instead, he stayed inside the bank, taking control of the terrified employees. Gun in hand, he pressed the barrel against the teller's head. We got 6543. It was as if he was counting down the seconds before the police would arrive. And he was right. By the time officers surrounded the bank, he was already gone. His movements weren't random. FBI analysts soon realized that he deliberately hit banks in different police jurisdictions to complicate the investigation. He never robbed the same place twice, said one of the lead agents. He'd hit one town, then another 30 miles away, then another on the opposite side of the county. He was making sure no single police department could track him easily, and he was careful about his getaways. Each stolen vehicle was taken from shopping center parking lots, always belonging to employees. He had developed a pattern. Steal a car right as someone started their shift. Use it for robbery. Dump it a few blocks away. Leave no fingerprints, no DNA, no trace. By the time the car was reported stolen, he was already gone. With no solid evidence to go on, investigators decided to take a different approach. They visited costume shops across Chicago, hoping someone might remember selling fake beards or disguises to a suspicious customer. Nothing. Store clerks had no recollection of anyone who matched the description. Months passed. Between January 1990 and February 1991, the Bearded Bandit had pulled off 7 successful bank robberies. And then, without warning, he vanished. The robbery stopped. Had he been caught for something else? Had he left town? Had he been killed? No one knew. For 9 months, there was nothing but silence. And then, in November 1991, he resurfaced with a vengeance. For nearly a year, the Bearded Bandit had disappeared without a trace. Investigators speculated. Was he in jail for another crime? Had he moved to another state? Or was he simply laying low, waiting for the heat to die down? They didn't have to wonder for long. On November 4th, 1991, Officer Kevin Marr of the Palatine Police Department was on a routine patrol, accompanied by a rookie officer on a training ride-along. While driving down Quinton Road, Marr noticed an oncoming car with expired tags. Instinct kicked in. He turned his cruiser around and told his trainee, "Let's pull this guy over. I'll show you how to run a routine traffic stop." The driver complied, slowing to a stop by the curb. And then everything exploded. Before Marr could even step out his squad car, the driver threw open his door, gun in hand. He fired. He's got a gun. The first shot tore through the windshield, striking Marr in the shoulder. Shards of glass sliced into his face and ear. Disoriented but still alive, he grabbed his radio. "Officer down. Shots fired. I've been hit." The radio call sent officers scrambling from across multiple precincts. Within minutes, police swarmed the area. Hundreds of officers from neighboring departments joined the search, accompanied by K-9 units and helicopters. But the shooter was already gone. The investigation into the shooting quickly revealed an alarming connection. The abandoned getaway vehicle had been stolen from a shopping center parking lot. The ignition was tampered with and covered by cloth, just like in the Bearded Bandit's previous heists. The shooter was described as a white male about 5 feet 11 inches, with facial hair. This wasn't just a random act of violence. The Bearded Bandit was back. And now, he wasn't just robbing banks. He was willing to kill cops. With an officer wounded and a gunman on the loose, law enforcement took the case personally. We knew this wasn't just another criminal. This was someone who had no problem opening fire on a cop in broad daylight, said Chief John Cole. The search intensified. Police locked down neighborhoods, combed through surveillance footage, and searched for any connection to recent car thefts. Still, the suspects slipped through their fingers. The Bearded Bandit had proven once again that he was always one step ahead. But this time, the FBI was determined. They weren't going to let him disappear again. After the attempted murder of Officer Marr, law enforcement intensified their efforts to track down the Bearded Bandit. The FBI, state police, and multiple local departments formed a task force, pooling resources to finally bring him down. But they knew they were dealing with someone who had extensive knowledge of police tactics. He anticipated their moves. He monitored police radio frequencies, and every time they thought they had a lead, he vanished. They needed a new strategy, one that would force him to make a mistake. Investigators focused on one critical pattern. The bandit always stole his getaway cars from shopping center employee parking lots, taking them right at the start of a work shift, ensuring the theft wouldn't be noticed for hours. If they could find a stolen car before he used it, they might be able to catch him in the act. So, officers began monitoring reports of stolen vehicles that fit his preferred profile. Plain, mid-sized sedans, stolen from Chicago-area shopping centers, belonging to employees on long shifts. It was a long shot, but soon the effort paid off. In December 1991, a Niles, Illinois officer patrolling a residential area noticed something odd, an abandoned car that had been reported stolen from a shopping center. The officer alerted the task force, and they immediately began around-the-clock surveillance. Days later, another stolen vehicle matching the bandit's pattern appeared in Rolling Meadows, Illinois, that made 2 suspected getaway cars. The FBI took a risky step. They installed tracking devices and remote engine kill switches in both vehicles. Then they waited. A week later, on December 13, 1991, their patience was rewarded. A man approached one of the stolen cars. From their stakeout position, agents watched closely. This is it. This is our guy. The suspect got into the car. The tension was suffocating. Would he notice something was off? Would he pull another disappearing act? The agents stayed ready, knowing that the last time they got close, the bandit had opened fire on a police officer. They had one chance to get this right. And this time, they weren't letting him go. The moment the suspect slid into the stolen car, the FBI knew they had him. Special Agent Hank Schmidt observed from a distance. That's our guy. The man started the engine and pulled away. Agents trailed him, keeping their distance while the hidden tracker fed them his every move. A second vehicle, a small van, followed behind him. 2 suspects. The agents couldn't risk losing them, but they also couldn't risk being seen. Then, the suspect parked the stolen car near a bank. That's when the agents knew this was his next target. Instead of waiting for the robbery, they planned to intercept him before he could strike. Agents suspected that the pair would return to pick up a second stolen getaway car in Rolling Meadows. They were right. The man exited the bank area and got into the second stolen car. Now, the FBI had enough proof. This was definitely the Bearded Bandit. Time to make their move. The suspect drove toward a parking lot. As soon as he got in the car, the FBI remotely shut down the engine. He froze, realizing something was wrong. Then agents swarmed. FBI, hands up. For a split second, it seemed like he might reach for something, a weapon maybe. Hands where we can see them. A tense moment passed. Then he surrendered. Agents rushed in, cuffing him before he could react. Inside his bag, a loaded firearm, a police scanner, gloves, fake beards, and a disguise kit. It was over. The bearded bandit was in custody. When they ran his ID, investigators finally had a name, Jeffrey Erickson. And it turned out their suspicions were right all along. Erickson was a former police officer. Years earlier, he had trained as a patrolman in a Chicago suburb but resigned before facing termination. While on the force, he had excelled in firearms training but showed little interest in actual police work. At some point, he made a decision. Instead of enforcing the law, he would use his training to break it. But there was still one loose end, his wife, Jill Erickson. Agents tracked her to their home, keeping watch as she prepared to flee. But when law enforcement moved in to arrest her, she did something shocking. She led them on a high-speed chase across multiple jurisdictions, shooting at officers as she drove. With bullets flying, police tried everything to stop her, eventually taking out her tires. Finally, backed into a corner, Jill ended the chase on her own terms. Before officers could reach her, she turned the gun on herself. With Jill dead and Jeffrey in custody, the FBI finally closed the case. But Erickson had one more trick up his sleeve. Months later, during his 1992 trial, Erickson somehow freed himself from his restraints while being transported from the courthouse. He overpowered a U.S. Marshal, stole his gun, and shot him dead. As he ran toward the exit, another officer opened fire, killing him instantly. Jeffrey Erickson was dead. His crime spree, his near-legendary ability to evade capture, his cold-blooded willingness to kill, all ended that day. For the families of those he terrorized, justice had come too late for comfort. But for law enforcement, the relief was undeniable. The bearded bandit would never hurt anyone again. Case closed.